All right, welcome to NFL Outdated Cover 2 series. This episode, we were talking about the Buffalo Bills, and I am joined by Kevin Masari, right?
Close, very close. Misseri, but close
Masari,
enough.
that's what it was. I wrote it down. Yeah,
You're close.
Masari. From the Cap, Trainwreck Sports, official Buffalo Bills podcast. I'm so excited to have you joining us. Welcome.
Thank you, man. Really appreciate it. Pleasure to be here. Really looking forward to the show.
Yeah, for me, this is an opportunity to learn as much as I can about football, the Bills, especially with this weekend facing the Chiefs. A lot to go on this weekend, and really a lot lot to be excited about as a Bills fan, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Like it's it's a really good time to be a Bills fan. The Bills have waited a long time. Bills fans have waited a long time for this era. We have a lot of corny things going on in the Bills Mafia right now, but the passing of the torch from Jim Kelly in the mid '90s to Josh Allen now on the later 2000s really was that passing, and it was a big transition for us. The Bills were bad for many years. They were bad for many, many years. And worse than bottoming out at 2-14 or 3-13. They had too many years of 7-9 football, 8-8, and it really set them back. They'd win games at the end of the year, and they would do things that wouldn't get them in prime position for really the quarterbacks that they were looking for Cam. At one point, they wanted Cam Newton pretty badly back in their day. They wanted Ben Roethlisberger. Was a big story around here, and ended up with J.P. Lossman. So there are many scenarios like that, but this time around, finally, it all came to a head in the 2018 draft, and being able to land Josh Allen instead of Josh Rosen or Baker Mayfield. And the franchise changed from there. Like they brought in Brandon Beane. And obviously Sean McDermott, who modeled after Cam Newton. They were looking for that big, athletic, always healthy type of quarterback, and that's what they found in Josh Allen. So it's been a crazy time to be a Bills fan.
Yeah, I mean, and obviously, I'm a Bears fan, and that quarterback position is so important. And yeah, I mean, I remember watching through the '90s, and there's so much kind of talent that was going through the Bills, just not at the quarterback position. And I'm actually wearing my Iowa stuff here, and I'm not sure like how much you followed Josh Allen's college career, but he did face the Iowa Hawkeyes in his last year, and they actually they handled him pretty well. And so when he was coming out of college, there were a lot of question marks. When you look at his growth from then the next his couple years and now, what has been the difference the last couple years?
I mean, for Josh Allen, there's one thing that draft analysts, pundits didn't get right? There's one major factor. Obviously, we knew he had the arm talent. We saw it in the combine. We saw the raw physical ability. We saw the athleticism, which was always on display. That's something the Bills really liked. The thing that everyone got wrong, but maybe Brandon Beane or maybe other GMs that would have had him ranked higher, we don't really know. He got picked 7th. But the thing that they got right was his ability to learn. His leadership qualities, his intangibles are 99.9 out of 100. He is literally, players rally around him. They love him. He's loved by the community and the city. He's got a whole wing dedicated to his grandmother in our hospital system here. It's incredible. Like the guy is he's not one of those players that are polarizing in the community. Like some other quarterbacks can be, like Big Ben or like even Aaron Rodgers at points. He is absolutely beloved by the Bills community, and his ability to grow. The thing that what's funny about Josh Allen is if he needs to work on his let's say his intermediate throws, his ability to hit throws over the middle, which is an actual example. He spent the entire offseason working on it and then got really good at it. And now he has a tight end in Dawson Knox that he finds in that space all the time. And it's been that all his whole career. He couldn't complete short passes. He was inaccurate. Focused on it his entire first year after his rookie year. He couldn't hit deep throws. That was a big thing last year. That's what he's been working on. He's a great deep ball thrower. I mean, so it's just that maturity of his mindset, his work ethic, just that determination and will. And he loves being doubted, loves it. when he's on top is when you start to see that complacency, like, a little bit in the middle of the year for the Bills. But when he's doubted, like this year, he felt really bad about being the fourth quarterback in the AFC Pro Bowl, which is so stupid.
Mhm.
But there's no way Josh Allen's the fourth quarterback in the AFC, and he felt some type of way about it, and has won 5 games since.
Yeah, and you look at kind of what he's done. I mean, obviously, yeah, there have been ups and downs. One of the low points, I don't, that Patriots loss. I mean, what was the difference between that game and other than the weather, I guess, and last week?
Couple of things. So the biggest thing that you can say about that is, now Orchard Park's a unique place, right? So the way that stadium is built, so here's the stadium. Actually, here's the stadium right here, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you have it caves downward. And most people don't realize the way that wind swirls like this in that stadium. If you catch a gust of that, you can barely walk, let alone throw a football. And even being in the stands is tough. So there's times like in that game, and I'm telling you, we're not using this as an excuse often, but Josh Allen has caught 3 poor Orchard Park weather games here, and the weather there is different. It's not even like, so being in North Buffalo where I had a house, it's the weather is literally different 30 minutes away down to South Buffalo where
Wow.
Orchard Park is. Comes right off the lake. And it's horrible. That's why land was cheap there, and why Ralph Wilson in the early days built his stadium there. Got cheap land, a lot of it, put a big stadium on it back in the 70s. And that's why it's there. And the weather was the reason that land was affordable. And they just, the way the lake band worked, and it is horrific. So to kind of take it full circle, I kid you not, there's no way that the Bills could play in that. And once the game rolled around, should the Bills have adjusted better? Yes. But during that game, they're a passing team. And especially at that point, they didn't have the running game going like they do right now. That was their game plan. And Josh Allen played incredibly well considering those weather elements. And quite frankly, so did the Bills defense. They let up
Yeah.
one long run. They played that incredibly well, and that's where we get the Sean McDermott soundbite of, we're not going to give Belichick credit. That was blown out of proportion. All he meant was, like, we played good too. We beat ourselves. We were in the red zone 3 times at the end of the game and didn't score, missed a field goal, turned it over on downs. So basically they're saying we beat ourselves. Like, yes, he ran the ball fine. Like, that's their quarterback threw 3 times, but we'll show you coming up that the Bills are actually, take a little bit of those weather elements away. They buried them in New England and then continued to bury them in Orchard Park last week.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you look at, you talk about that running game kind of struggling at one point, like, is Singletary, is he going to be the guy now? Or, I mean, I know Zach
Yeah.
Moss was supposed to be in there, wasn't he?
I've never been a Zach Moss fan. Even
Yeah.
the second I saw him step on from Utah on the field, I was never sold on him. He's slow. He doesn't make good cuts. The thing was, he's supposed to have a really pounding, bruising running back that doesn't fumble. We haven't seen any of that. He fumbles. He's not a pounding, bruising running back, and he doesn't get short yards. He's actually a little bit more elusive than I thought. So he ended up being really a not as good version of Devin Singletary, who doesn't have home run hitting ability. But man, breaks tackles. You can't get him down. He's slippery. He gotten a beastly in the last 3 months in terms of literally his physical stature. He's been the guy, and he's been the running back 1, in my opinion. Just runs so smoothly. He's a perfect complement to the offense. And now that the offensive line's playing better, Devin Singletary is a huge piece of the puzzle. And yeah, I mean, I think he's 3rd in the league in rushing in the last 6 or 7 weeks. And then including the playoffs, like, now if you go to gambling sites or whatever, he's arguably the 2nd or 3rd ranked running back for player props purposes. So Devin Singletary is a huge piece of the Bills offense. They found him at the 12th hour in terms of getting him going, but still ended the season with 900 rushing yards. And really, most people don't realize the Bills, between Josh Allen and Devin Singletary, the Bills running game is, top 4 in the league. We wouldn't think that.
Yeah. I mean, Breida kind of filled in well there a little bit, but, so kind of going forward, is Singletary going to be one of the keys to this week then?
Yeah, absolutely. So now they'll even inactivate Breida. Had his own fumbling issues, man. Like that, you asked about the New England game. The Bills were driving early in that game and he couldn't take a handoff. Like the wind was bad. Like you could blame whatever you wanted on Josh Allen not putting it in his breadbasket right. I mean, whatever you want. But at the end of the day, you're a running back and you need to take different handoffs. He couldn't do it in the element. That's a perfect example of the elements. Couldn't even hand the ball off at times. So he fumbled it. Really hasn't seen much run since that. The Bills really keyed in on that. And they punished Isaiah McKenzie earlier in the year on a kickoff return against Indianapolis for dropping a ball that changed the game. And the Bills ended up losing by a lot in Indy. They focused on that as a turning point. Isaiah McKenzie was then benched and then had a huge game in New England a couple of weeks ago. So the Bills really won't use Breida. They don't even use Zach Moss anymore. It's fully Devin Singletary 100% of the time.
Yeah, and so kind of talking a little bit about kind of that play calling, I wanted to kind of dive into Daboll, sorry, Brian
There you
Daboll,
go.
and obviously I'm a Bears fan, and he is up for the several head coaching positions, including the Bears. And I heard some criticism of him of going away from the run too much, and therefore he might not be a good match for the Bears because obviously they got David Montgomery. I mean, what are you seeing? As someone who covers the Bills in a comment like that? I mean, is that fair?
I'm hard on Brian Daboll. I think
Okay.
that he was gifted with a quarterback with a relentless work ethic, weapons that are as good as any in the league with Stephon Diggs and Isaiah McKenzie and Emmanuel Sanders, Gabriel Davis, who's been really good for the Bills. Cole Beasley is a zone beater, Dawson Knox, and now the emergence of Singletary. Like, I mean, I'd argue that a lot of offensive coordinators could have a lot of good success with a top 3 quarterback in that kind of weapons, and now a gelling offensive line. His job's pretty easy. You see Brian Daboll get a little bit creative in places that he shouldn't be. We saw it against Atlanta. Not the world's biggest game in the world, but still was getting a little bit cute. I mean, you see it at times against the Jets late in the year in a game. I mean, I guess they technically needed to win the division, and they did. But getting a little bit cute with Stephon Diggs throws and things that are kind of funny, but at the end of the day, like really not. So he's a creative mind. Josh Allen will probably tell you he calls plays that he's never heard of before, and he comes up with this stuff. It's just easy to do with an MVP quarterback. And the question here is like the chicken and the egg. That's the Buffalo discussion now. Did Josh Allen make Brian Daboll, or did Brian Daboll make Josh Allen? I'm on the Josh Allen made Brian Daboll train, but Brian Daboll is a good players coach. He certainly is. People do like playing for him. I have to say that. He is creative. I will give him that. And honestly, he struggled with the running game for 75% of this year, but it's been dynamite when it matters. So we'll see how that plays out this weekend as a huge piece of the running puzzle. And then lastly, like for me, he's always been a good running. If you look at his stats, even on bad teams, he's always been able to get his running game going. But now that he has a pass game and a really strong unit in Josh Allen and his weapons, he struggles with figuring that game flow out. But I don't know that that's the biggest deal in the world as the head coach. I've always said maybe he'll make a better head coach than he will because of players love him than he will an offensive coordinator, where sometimes Sean McDermott is a outstanding defensive, like an absolute stud defensive coordinator. He's built a huge staff with Leslie Frazier and a couple of other ex-defensive coordinators. And it's been amazing since he's been here for the most part, outside of some lapses last year, actually, when their defense, they needed the defense the most, and it struggled badly in the playoffs last year. And their offense was even better, maybe even a tick better last year than it is this year. But all that being said, I like Brian Daboll as a potential candidate. I think players love him, and he's creative, and he has basically rebuilt the Bills offense if he gets the credit for it. But he's struggled everywhere else he's been. He's done that. He has not done that with other quarterbacks. It's hard for me to sit here and say, like, it is Brian Daboll, but I do think he is, this time around, with how many job openings there are, is a prime candidate for a position.
Absolutely. And you talked about on the other side of the ball as well, Leslie Frazier, because he has also gotten an interview with the Bears, and he's had, his chance before,
Yep.
and obviously now he's doing well. Like, how much of the defense is on Leslie Frazier and how much of it is on McDermott?
Leslie Frazier's an incredible coach. Like the one thing, so I'm going to flip the script here. The
Yeah.
one thing is he's an incredible coach. Players love him as well, just like Brian Daboll. But the difference is his defense is always consistently good. The only time I've seen lapses from this defense was last year's playoffs. They struggled against Phillip Rivers against the Colts. They basically shut out Lamar Jackson in the second round. So that was a good turnaround. And then they just didn't show up against Kansas City in the AFC Championship game last year, but had its problems during the regular season too. But outside of that, that defense walked its way into the playoffs in 17, breaking a long drought. In 18, it played pretty good with zero talent. The Bills had rehauled for Josh Allen and everything else that year. 19, it was fantastic. 20 was that little up and down. And this year, it's ridiculous. Like they lost Trey White. They shouldn't be good. Pass defense should have struggled. He's one of their best, but he helped develop the best safety tandem in the NFL in Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer. The guys are absolutely incredible. First team All Pro, second team All Pro. You saw a play on display that absolutely basically ended the game early on last week, taking the ball away from Nelson Aguilar. And I mean, quite frankly, every cornerback that plays in this system is amazing, even from the Kevin Johnsons of the world to, now Taron Johnson, our nickel cornerbacks getting paid. Trey White's amazing as a late first round pick. You have Levi Wallace, a UDFA, who's been fantastic. The linebackers are really good. So now the defensive tacklers are coming on with Harrison Phillips, who's been awesome down the stretch, and Ed Oliver finally living up to his top 10 pick potential. I mean, the Bills defense is incredible, and a lot of it is Leslie Frazier losing probably one of their best, if not their best defensive player, and still playing at a high level. If he shows it again this week in the highest stage, one of the highest stages possible, I like Leslie Frazier as a candidate. I think he's a good coach. I would want him to have some young gun coordinators underneath him, but I think he's a fantastic leader of men. And I know he'll get the rap. As the Vikings, you play the Vikings, like, I don't know, 500 coach, something like that, which is A, already better than some of the other candidates, but B, he is an incredible coach. And I think it's his time and his turn to show that, like, I can be better now, even albeit the first stint and the age. So to me, I love him as a candidate.
Yeah, all those things are great. Yeah, I mean, and obviously Leslie Frazier with the Bears connection as well. The things that hold me back from really going, yes, I'm on board is number one, the age, and number two, I guess personality wise, I just don't know if he is that much. I just don't know if he's too quiet for the position for the Chicago market, for what they need now, for the head coach, that they've gone through, just with Nagy and, even before that, they're just so many missteps. And it really does seem like, looking at the ownership, that Frazier would be the choice because that's kind of where the Bears go. But I don't think as a fan base, we'd be excited about a defensive coach. We need someone to develop that offense, develop Fields. And, obviously, for the Bills, it's a good conversation to have, Daboll or, Allen, right? I mean, chicken or the egg, hey, you got a team that's successful, whether it's, now only obviously you're set up for a while, and that's kind of what, other teams want to do. So kind of looking at, I mean, if you were, starting over, who would you rather have? Like if McDermott was not in the picture, who would you rather have as a head coach, Daboll or Frazier?
So let's just say, for instance, Sean McDermott retired or just went off into the sun. They win the Super Bowl and he's done, whatever the scenario may be. I personally think the team stays closer together with Leslie Frazier. So it's easy for me to say that, looking at it from a lens of like the team's good. I don't want any issues. So I'm looking at, I don't need risk now at this point of my career in terms of watching the Bills. Leslie Frazier is that candidate that I know can continue to keep the team together and motivated and keep keep the puzzle going, keep everything, perfect. I like him better as a coordinator, and I like him better as a coach. Brian Daboll, there is too many unknowns for me. He's a creative coach. I think he'll get caught into the play calling. He's one of those candidates that has like Sean McVay level potential, but then has a floor that scares me. I'll just be honest.
Nagy level floor, maybe.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. That's what scares me. Like, I'll be honest, and it depends. You guys tell me, like, if you like that in a coordinator or a coaching candidate, and then potentially, like with Frazier, do you get a good offensive mind on the other side with him? Like Ken Dorsey, the Bills quarterback coach, he should get all the credit. The Bills would be more upset to lose him. Because he's basically going to be the Bills offensive coordinator next year. I mean, we're pretty sure Daboll goes somewhere.
Yeah.
But Frazier, I've heard, has a connection to him that might come with him. And I'll tell you what stings more would be losing the quarterback's coach into an offensive coordinator position. And now if Josh Allen loses his offensive coordinator and his second offensive coordinator, we start to worry a little bit here. So I think the potential of Ken Dorsey coming with Frazier, now you got that young offensive mind who has worked with Josh Allen daily. That to me is pretty enticing if I'm a fan of literally any of the openings.
I had not heard that. That is a great point, because that is the one thing, and I think Eberflus from the Colts is getting a second interview with the Bears here next week. And obviously the defensive mind, if you take the defensive mind, whether it's Frazier or any other defensive coach, then what happens with the offense? And if you get an offensive coordinator that's, hot young offensive coordinator, and then they leave, where does that leave the maturation of Justin Fields and a young player that matters? Obviously now you would think that Josh Allen is to that point, that MVP level where he's learning on his own. He can kind of adapt, but Fields would need more stability than Allen, correct?
I would think, knowing we know now, yes.
Yeah.
But did we know that in 2017? I don't know. Excuse me, 2018. After the end of that, I don't know. I think it's easy to say, but I mean, Fields, the difference here is Fields has played at the highest level of college. He's shown he's been successful. I've watched his show QB1 where he was a hot prospect in high school.
Yeah.
So the difference there is Josh Allen, no scholarship offers, plays JUCO, one offer to Wyoming, basically then plays good finally, then is looked at top 10 and then gets basically ridiculed in the draft process. Either people absolutely loved him or thought he was a 10th round pick. That there's this difference. So I just think, to me, you have that, like, maybe he needed more stability because he's used to not always being doubted. Whereas Fields is kind of the opposite, where he's always been, maybe until this year, always been used to like the man, like being the guy, like the talented, like no one really doubts you, like been able to pick what college you wanted to go to, really. So you have all of those, Georgia or Ohio State, you have all of that going for him. But yes, I mean, I think any young quarterback needs stability. And to me, I hate the idea of getting an offensive coach and then it failing, because he's done too. Because then Fields is done. So there is that to go with it, that if he's your guy and you're telling me he's your guy, he needs to be in on any coaching interview. And if he likes Leslie Frazier, and for instance, or Eberflus, maybe that's the better way to go, because then he can handpick an offensive coordinator that can work with Fields, and you can continue to grow that defense. That you guys can potentially show that you have. And being a Khalil Mack guy myself, I've covered him. I've talked to him. I've interviewed him. I see him around town sometimes.
Cool.
So fantastic guy. Really, really stand up dude. I really like Khalil a lot as a person. And to me, I think you guys have everything to do with continuing to grow that deep. The Bills could have done the same thing and hired an offensive coach. Look at the Bills model. If that's what you're trying to copy, or it's a hot topic right now, is copying the Bills. Everyone wants our executives, like, Shane is in an interview candidate. Pretty much the Giants love him and want him. Everybody wants our Brandon Beane's built an incredible front office. And all of them have been interviewed. Like you have so many different options out of the Bills front office. And, you know, if you want to copy them, what did the Bills do? They hired a defensive coordinator on a good team at the time, the Panthers, and then decided that just because like he's a defensive coordinator doesn't mean we can't figure out the offensive side of the ball. Started with Rick Dennison. The Bills immediately switched from him to Brian Daboll. And it's been the right move since. And the Bills defense is still incredible and their offense is good. So I like that model. It's worked here. I think if you can find a leader of men that your players love and respect, have your quarterback pick that offensive coordinator that works for him. Easier to do that than a head coach. You might be onto something. That's the Bills model.
And tell you what, I mean, I think you're selling me on this. I did have another question too. You know, kind of going to with Josh Allen, and so obviously he's been doubted. And you say chicken or the egg. Another layer to that is Stephon Diggs. You know, is Josh Allen without Stephon Diggs?
So this was one that was popular last year at the end. So this was very popular during the year last year, and at the end of the year, it was a topic of like, is Stephon Diggs the reason he's good? And we heard a lot from Vikings fans after that trade went down. He's going from Kirk Cousins to Josh Allen. Like, who would want to do that? They're going to lose. They're still going to be 8-8 or 9-7. Like, you know, that ended quickly. Real quickly. Stephon Diggs loves it here. He absolutely loves Josh Allen. They're like best friends. If you've ever seen like Sports Illustrated or any of those, they're like inseparable. They're like really close. So yes, he probably enjoyed leaving Kirk Cousins.
Absolutely.
I mean, just on a personal level, and then professionally, best year ever last year. This year, he's still been really good.
Yeah.
I think that Josh Allen helped Stephon Diggs as much as Stephon Diggs helped Josh Allen. So to me, the Bills needed a number one receiver the second they thought he was available. They claimed they tried to trade for him at the deadline in 2019. The Vikings weren't budging, and the Bills lived up to it and said when they found out his tweet and he was finally unhappy, the Bills were happy to give up a first, turned into Justin Jefferson, so they did okay too. Both teams won in that case, in my opinion. But to me, I still think if you look at the weapons that Josh Allen's had, he's been able to do stuff with limited options in his career. Even as a rookie, where a lot of people like to point like, oh, look, Mac Jones is better than Josh Allen's rookie year. Josh Allen literally was throwing to Andre Holmes and a bunch of trash. So he had not even a running game. His offensive line was in shambles. It's a completely different team in 2018 than the Bills have now in 2021. So, you know, I think Josh Allen has a lot of credit. So to me, I'm on the Josh Allen side, as you could tell with the Brian Daboll debate. Yeah. I still think Stephon Diggs is a great player, but Allen helps him as much as anything too.
Yeah, and so obviously, you know, Diggs has, you know, just an amazing season last year, and he still had a great season this year as well. But you know, what's been the difference? I mean, if defense is kind of keyed on him more, this year.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he's going up against undoubtedly number ones, best of the best. You look at like who they play. They've played some defensive teams this year. They haven't played the teams with the best offenses in the world. The Bills' schedule this year was really focused on a bunch of defensive teams this season, including New England. And New England's goal is to take out your best weapon. And he's still able to show out against New England. It's just game flow. If you're going to double Stephon Diggs and shade over there, A, you're opening up lanes for Josh Allen. B, you're opening up lanes for Dawson Knox in the passing game in the soft zones. And C, your number 3 cornerback's not good enough to guard depending Gabriel Davis or Isaiah McKenzie, as we saw in the New England games, or Emmanuel Sanders. You don't have a 4th corner to cover Emmanuel Sanders. And the Bills have taken a lot better advantage of that this year than they needed to last year when in Kansas City at the end of the season, when Stephon Diggs wasn't getting open in the AFC Championship game, the Bills are kind of stymied. This year, the offense was a little bit better last year in terms of like overall production. Josh Allen was incredible. This year, he's still really, really, really good, but it's just more versatile. You can take away Diggs if you want. You can take away, Dawson Knox if that's your play. Whatever you want to do, the Bills will find one of their 6 weapons. And the scariest part for the NFL, all those weapons return to Buffalo next year. So To me, the Bills are in great shape. They don't lose anybody on their offense except maybe their offensive coordinator. And Stephon Diggs is a big part of the puzzle. But if you take him away, the team's gonna do just as good. And then you stop taking him away, and then he gets back involved. So it's worked out.
Yeah, and when you look at it, I mean, is this kind of the best opportunity you think that the Bills have? I mean, obviously they're, when you kind of look down the line, they're set up, but with that, all the pieces, is this kind of the best opportunity? Do you think?
You would still look at it, right? The team's sitting in the divisional game again,
Mm-hmm.
and they were last year, and they really pounded on the Ravens last year in the divisional game. And this season, it's the same thing. The difference is what the Bills lacked last year was that top flight defense that they have this year. If they had Trey White, I would absolutely say the Bills would be favorites, right?
Absolutely.
Because they took care of the Chiefs already. The Bills are the more complete team all around, but Patrick Mahomes is that scary. Still, like, he struggled at times as well. But the Bills will do the same thing the Patriots do, and they're going to do their darndest to take away Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill. They're going to say, beat me with Pringle, beat me with DeMarcus Robinson, beat me with Mecole Hardman. Fine. And in the first game, they proved it. They said, we can take away your weapons. Mecole Hardman went for like 89 yards or something that he never does. But the Bills didn't care. They're like, awesome. Like, that means we won. And they did. So they're going to have the same game plan, but the defense is really good. It's going to confuse Patrick Mahomes. And the difference is the Bills can bang bodies with them. If they score, fine. The Bills aren't going to be in a place of being scared. But yeah, you would think so. If they can get through the divisional game, it's looking pretty good for the Bills because they feel like this game is harder than the AFC Championship.
Absolutely. And if it comes down to, whether it's this game or the AFC Championship, if it comes down to a close game, are you trusting McDermott?
That's a good question because if there's a fault to Sean McDermott, it's his in-game decisions. He's a great players coach. He's great at strategy. He's great at adjustments. He's good at motivation, playing with a chip on his shoulder, getting the most out of his players, hiring good coaches. As two of his coordinators are probably going to be head coaches this year. All of that has worked out. His struggles, the Bills are 0-5 in one-score games. It's the first time a team has gone this far not winning a one-score game. Now, they were 5-1 last year. Their only loss on a fluke Hail Mary. Or the Bills would have been 6-0 in one-score games last year. So we saw some regression from that 6-0 mark to the 0-5. All advanced statistics tell you the Bills should have been 3-2 in those games. Some bad bounces, some bad missed calls, one in Tampa Bay where they didn't call a blatant hold in the end zone on Stephon Diggs, and they did against Levi Wallace, which against Mike Evans was even less of a penalty. That's they call it on Stephon Diggs, the Bills win. Josh Allen stumbles, which you never see. He slips against Tennessee on a 4th and inches in Nashville to win the game on the 1. And he stumbles and he gets caught by one arm by a good defensive tackle. I mean, it's possible. It clearly happened. Josh Allen doesn't get stopped much like that. It happened. And you got a couple of incidents here. Now you're counting 0-2. And you got a couple of more. The Bills lost to the Steelers week 1 on a blocked punt. So you just have a couple of really fluky, weird things that you had continuing on since that Hail Mary that you had where Josh Allen took the team down the field with like 65 seconds or something to beat the Cardinals and then basically lose on a chuck from the 50 that just you don't see much. So, they've had some bad luck one-score games since that Cardinals game. Before that, they were 5-0 in one-score games, and since that game, they're 0-6 if you count that game into this year. So they've had some pretty bad luck in those. And then you have the 55-mile-an-hour wind game where the Bills get stopped on the 10 to end that game against New England that we've already talked about. So there's these games, and all the advanced statistics, DVOA, whatever you want to use, would point to the Bills should have been the 1 seed and should have beaten. This game should be the AFC Championship game. We're robbed of that, but it's still just as good in the divisional round. The only difference is I do think the winner of this game goes to the Super Bowl. I don't think the Bengals or the Titans will have enough to beat either of these teams again.
Yeah, and when you kind of look at this game coming up, this obviously I think you had tweeted that the Bills have not won a road playoff game in 29 years, I believe.
That's right.
You know,
Yep.
and you know the difference between having a home playoff game in Buffalo and being on the road. Talk about that. I mean, is that something that maybe will give Josh Allen maybe a bigger chip on his shoulder?
You would think so. They've been really good at starting to check off these New England, like New England's back, New England's back. That they were only down for 1 year ever. Like
Yeah.
that's it. Like there was a COVID year, no one cared, and then they put that to rest. And they're like, "That's that. We just beat you twice. Like that's absolutely not true. Like you guys still aren't even close to on our level." Absolutely. Josh Allen plays his best with a chip on his shoulder. All someone needs to do is tell him that your team hasn't won in 29 years, and it means more to him. Tell him he's got to go to Jacksonville in the regular season.
Ooh.
He might not care. And unfortunately, it's just a mindset thing. And he probably should have, because if he did, they'd be the 1 seed. But you can't go to Jacksonville with a busted up offensive line and lose 9-6. That's just weird. That just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
But this time around, yes, the team is ticking on all cylinders. Josh Allen's going to basically be told your team's never won a road. I mean, essentially, you haven't run a road playoff game in since you've been born, like older than you are. So his goal is going to be to end that streak. The team's also been really good at home playoff games. So Josh, you lost in Jacksonville. This game should be in Orchard Park any day of the week. The team's 12-1 historically. Conversely to that stat, they don't lose at home in the playoffs. Teams can't come up here and play, even if it affects the Bills as much as the other team, and it does, as we saw in the New England game.
Mm-hmm.
You can't come up here as a dome team or as a good weather team and think you're going to win. Like the Titans coming up here, it just wouldn't. It's not going to happen. Then you lost that opportunity because you didn't play well. Like a smidgen of stretch during the middle of the season. So that does mean a lot to him. It is a pretty weird stat. As good as the team was in the 90s, and then as good as they are now, they haven't won. But realistically, though, they've played a lot of home games back when they were good. Yep. They played a lot of home games now. So there really is that one Chiefs loss this time last year in the AFC Championship. That's really the only. So really the stats 0-1, and it's to this Chiefs team. The bigger picture is the one of Stephon Diggs watching the Chiefs celebrate. That's the picture circulating around pretty much the entire city right now of saying Stephon Diggs and Josh Allen have a lot to prove. They showed it in week 5. If they can show that again, and that offense that you saw 7 possessions and 7 touchdowns, look, I don't care who you are. It's unstoppable.
Yeah. And you look at, just where this Chiefs defense was, early on in the season, and it looks very doable, to score points. And then obviously they've kind of clamped down recently. It's hard to kind of know, what's real, but obviously what's real is that the Bills know how to score points.
Yeah, and we just had on an analyst. He's actually a Texans analyst, and he on our pregame show, our preview show, and he basically stated that their current defensive resurgence is fool's gold. And he had a lot of examples for it. And now with this Willie Gay story, who's one of their top linebackers, of like trying to break a vacuum or something happened there, something interesting, and then they don't get a pass rush. They need to blitz a lot. So if the blitz gets home and they can create turnovers, that could be a success for them. The Chiefs, you don't ever want to play man coverage against Josh Allen. It's just not a good idea. Bill Belichick thought, as the best defensive mind ever, he thought that was the move to do. Got absolutely torched in it. I can't imagine Andy Reid's running man coverage much. It's just not. I mean, people are turning around and running with their receivers, and the Bills have good ones. If you're not careful, Josh Allen's just going to take 15 yards a time, and you can't play man against them. And they don't have a spy on Allen. You would say that the defense in Kansas City is fool's gold, regardless if they signed a 50-year-old Melvin Ingram. Like, it doesn't really change anything for me. So that, and the fact that they still have some liabilities at the safety position with Juan Thornhill and Daniel Sorensen, who they still play, and everyone hates him. Right. The Bills are feeling pretty good about their ability to put up offensively. And now the difference is the Chiefs fans are like, well, we have Chris Jones back. We didn't that week. And Daniel Sorensen isn't playing as much. Well, maybe, but the Bills also now have a running game. So we'll see how that plays a role into this.
Tell you what, I mean, the Chiefs, obviously, they looked good last week, but, that was, a gimme pretty much, I guess.
Yeah.
Um, you know, when you look at, Mahomes kind of having to run around so much, I mean, he can only do so much, and I know I'd interviewed early on in the season a Chiefs podcaster, and he just talked about, how really, other than Tyreek Hill, no other receiver was, every other receiver was trash. I mean, Hardman is, basically, um, you run around, you're going to find somebody open, right? But you got to have someone that other than just Tyreek Hill, and I mean, Kelsey is amazing too, but you got to have some other weapons as well. And it really seems like the Bills are primed to win this.
The Bills have so the difference there is Josh Allen's just as good as Patrick Mahomes, and Patrick Mahomes is a little better thrower. I think anyone in Buffalo would admit that he's almost pristine when he's on. So is Josh Allen though. But anyways, Josh Allen's the better runner, no matter how good Patrick Mahomes thinks he is at running the football. Josh Allen's one of the best, if not the best, running quarterback in the league right now. If he ran as much as Lamar Jackson did, I mean, you just can't tackle him. He's stiff-armed. He's jumped over Anthony Barr. He's stiff-armed Matthew Judon to the ground. Like, you just can't tackle him. It's impossible. So, like, it takes him slipping in Nashville, which did happen, to stop him and or gang tackling him, which, there's strategies there. So him as being one of the best runners in the league, I wouldn't consider Patrick Mahomes that. And then having one of the best weapon rooms, all picturing them all together. They have a receiver 1, they have a receiver 2, a receiver 3, and a receiver 4, and a backup in 5 in Isaiah McKenzie. And they have a tight end 1, and they have a running back 1 that they like now, who's been top 5 in the league in the last 10 weeks. So
as I was just kind of thinking about this as well, like, how much does, with Emmanuel Sanders, his Super Bowl experience, how much does that play effect in this as well? Like,
huge. That's why they had him. He scored 2 touchdowns the first time they played. Like, go ahead and guard Stephon Diggs, because Emmanuel Sanders has one of the biggest separation rates in the NFL and always has. He's a great route runner. Gabriel Davis is one of the best contested ball catchers in the league. He's unknown, but I've seen fewer people be able to make the boundary catches that he can make. He's a touchdown machine. He has like 20 in his first 2 years. Like, he's one of the most underrated receivers from the Jefferson class that you wouldn't think about. So you redraft there, and I make an argument he's a late first round pick. So the Bills feeling pretty comfortable, and then quite frankly, a top 6 tight end.
And that makes a difference.
It's changed the Bills' offense, and that's where some of the production of Stephon Diggs went. If you asked me earlier, they have
when Knox was out then as well, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And the Bills have like Knox absolutely annihilated them, the Chiefs, the first time they played. They don't have the linebackers to spy Allen and cover Knox. Quite frankly, they need to pick their poison, and if they try to take out Diggs, the Bills feel comfortable with all their healthy weapons, and they're the healthiest team in the league. Beside missing Trey White, the Bills don't have a single, even minor injury. No one. They have like 2 guys on IR, like Trey White, and then a backup offensive lineman.
Tell you what, I mean, I was thinking Bills before this, but I do see the Bills winning here. But then it also gets me to the realization that you're saying Bills win here, they're probably going to the Super Bowl, which means my guy Mitch Trubisky will be in the Super Bowl.
He will. Mitch Trubisky's liked here. We wanted an insurance policy. We think he's a poor man's Josh Allen. We think he plays similar football. He's a decent runner of the ball. There's some places I use 538 Sports for their analytics, and they call him like the 10th best player in the quarterback in the AFC, like behind or ahead of some starters. So like the Bills have potentially the 2nd best and the 10th best quarterbacks in the AFC. And I mean, they have an insurance blanket they didn't need to use, luckily, this year. But if the Bills and their weapons and their defense, they felt pretty good. If Mitch had to play 4 games, they could have gone 3-1, 2-2, and been right where they are today. So they signed him for an insurance policy. And I think he's liked his time here with Brian Daboll. Personally, I think he could follow. Wouldn't make sense in Chicago, but he could follow to the Giants or wherever. I could definitely see that as quite frankly, a possibility to watch out for this offseason.
That's a great point. And I actually did go to the 2019 Bears training camp, and Trubisky is such a great guy. He stayed after signing autographs, and he just he didn't really necessarily have a fair shot. With Nagy there, it really makes a difference if the quarterback is
You had that Nick Foles thing going on.
Yeah, it was just a mess, and he definitely didn't want him. And so the question is, can he be the guy? Can he be? And maybe Buffalo was probably the best spot for him to kind of at least kind of regroup, kind of become hopefully learn from Josh Allen and kind of learn that growth, because he is definitely a player I'd like to see do well. I wish Trubisky anything all success that he can have. It'd be great, a great story to see. Obviously, just it's not going to be in Buffalo starter, but that would be an interesting story for him to go and have a resurgence in his career.
Yeah, watch out for that. And I mean, I also wouldn't count out the fact that if he doesn't get the QB1 job he wants, he's not going. He's not going to leave here until he does. So
Smart.
Maybe he does need to play a game or two next season to show that that's what I would want if I was Mitchell Trubisky. I have all these Bills weapons. I know this offense now. This team's pretty good. I want to show that I'm good still, and then compound that into a 2-year, $17 or $18 million deal to show, how good I am potentially with my offensive coordinator, Brian Daboll, wherever he may wind up. So there are those possibilities that I see possible, but at the same time, I don't see him leaving his situation until he makes some money, which could happen. And 2, it's not going to somewhere where it's an absolute train wreck. So he's got his options. The Bills will take him back as long as he's one of the best backup quarterbacks in the league. And the Bills, if they ever have to use him, they'll have an enticing offer for him at the end of the offseason to stay. And they'll make it enticing for him not to go try to quarterback a really bad team and lose and basically end his career.
Yeah. If he one more opportunity and he's done. That'd be interesting. Well, you kind of talk about some possibilities, and obviously I think the Bills are going to win. But on the other side of the coin, what happens if the Bills lose this week?
I mean, I think it's fairly thought about as a disappointment. And that's tough to say playing a really good Kansas City team. This isn't playing even a Bengals team or something. They're playing a really good Kansas City team, and the Bills are 1.5. They're getting 1.5, but they're picked more than the Chiefs. It's probably 60-40 based on where you're looking. Money's coming in. The line's already dropping. So you'd argue they're projected to win by different pundits. They're a pretty popular pick in the media. Doesn't make me feel great about that, but it would be considered a major season fail because they did have Super Bowl aspirations, and anything can happen when you get to the Super Bowl in terms of the Packers could get it done, whatever. But the aspirations to make it there, you can't ever say to win, even though they'll tell you that. But in Bills fan land and the AFC the way it is, it's winnable. To make the Super Bowl and then have the game would be what the expectation is. And if they either lose here or lose in the AFC Championship game to the Titans, regardless of what round that was in, that would still sting that they should be there over the Bengals or the Titans. So it would be looked at as a disappointment. But the one thing I'll say is that the Bills fans are pretty comfortable that the fact that they return their entire offensive line, they return every single offensive weapon. We're not going to sulk for long because the era is still here. Luckily, we don't know when that could end, but as of right now, the Bills should not have their entire defense is still signed. Their safety play, their cornerbacks are still here. Their defensive line still here. Their linebackers are both signed. They don't have any turnover. There's not a single, they lose Jerry Hughes, who's about done or close to it. And they could probably resign him if they feel like he adds something to the roster, but with Gregory Rousseau and AJ Epinesa and
my Iowa guy.
And the Bills really like him, and he's been playing better. And Boogie Basham, they have some very young defensive ends that they like. Those defensive tackles are still here, and Ed Oliver. So quite frankly, the Bills will be back, and now with another draft pick and the emergence of Singletary, and really have a little bit of money to play with, and they will add a final piece or two to get them over the hump. So it would suck, but the expectations to make this Super Bowl for sure. And it was week 1, and it certainly is in the divisional round.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't know if it kind of changed, when kind of things kind of went downhill. If it was kind of like, oh, this is not going to happen. But if they get to the Super Bowl, is it worse? Because I remember those 4 Super Bowls. Would it be worse as a Bills fan to get to the Super Bowl and lose, or to lose in one of these next 2 rounds?
I think it's worse to lose right now in
Yeah.
in this weekend. I think the AFC is yours. At least you can claim that you made the AFC Championship last year. You technically went around further. You won the AFC this time, so now you have the AFC. The AFC crown runs through you. It's been historically proven that teams do go back to back. Look at the Chiefs, even though they won 1 and lost 1. Patriots have been able to do it. It's been pretty common to continue to be good, at least in a few year stretches. So I think it would be a running joke that they can't win. That'd be their 5th Super Bowl loss. It wouldn't be fun. But I do think like you have to look at it. You can't look at it like that in a vacuum in terms of like, oh my God, they only lose Super Bowl 4 straight. But I think you have to look at it in terms of like, that's what's the right progression for this team. And you can't just guarantee a victory against the Packers, the Bucks. If it's the Rams or the 49ers, you would probably expect to win. But the Bucks, who they played in overtime this year, played a great game, would be a fantastic Super Bowl. The Packers would be too. You can't just say you're going to win that, but I think you can look at the AFC and say you've already beat the Chiefs, and you do think you're better than the Bengals and the Bengals and the Titans at this stage.
Yeah, I tell you what, I mean, there are a lot of teams, especially the Bears, that would be, love to be in that position to, lose the Super Bowl, but then even, have that core, and basically the whole team together, and then with White coming back next year. So there's a lot of promise, a lot of excitement, for the Bills, definitely.
Absolutely. Brandon Beane's done a fantastic job with his cap. Like the Bills are all together. They'll be a team you'll see in either the division, the championship, or the Super Bowl rounds for the years to come, because he's done a fantastic job with his coaching staff. Maybe the Bears will have one of them. Maybe they'll go Eberflus. But if not, like there'll be 2 head coaches. I do believe both of them will most likely be head coaches this year, if not for sure one of them.
Absolutely. Well, I'm definitely going to be rooting for the Bills. There's a ton of Iowa connections with Micah Hyde, Epinesa, Butker, I believe. But
the other IR guy. Yep.
Yep. So, for me, grew up in the '90s. I was a Bills fan. I always wanted to see them win, and it was kind of Bears were terrible during those years, so I had to root for someone. So.
Hey, the Bills would go to Iowa and draft all their offensive linemen. So Sean McDermott loves it. He loves the area. I know he loves the talent. And they'll continue to probably draft from there. They love Ike Butker. Like he was a guy that was their starter for half the season until that crazy injury he had. He kind of helped secure the line a little bit. Great depth piece on the Bills. They really like him a lot. So a lot of Iowa connections there. Micah Hyde's probably one of the most liked players here in Buffalo. Probably top 5 on the most liked list. So we do have some Iowa connections, and AJ Epinesa is just a pass rusher we hope can start to reach his potential as he's started to look a little bit better. So in terms of all of that, I would say Sean McDermott would agree with you that he probably likes the college a pretty good amount.
Absolutely. Well, I definitely appreciate you joining me. So everyone can find you where again?
So you can find me on my Twitters where I do all my work at Kevin Masseri. We live stream from Trainwreck Sports as on your screen, and from the Crowd Assist Pod on Twitter. We have giveaways going all the time. We try our best to bring any news we hear. We do talk to the players quite frequently. They do charity softball games, and we make connections all the times with the players. So we like to bring stories as we hear them, not just our opinions. So you can find all of that stuff on Twitter and on our website, Trainwreck Sports, for all things Bills. And really, if you care about anything, all things in this area of Buffalo. So really appreciate you giving me the time to come on here and sell my case for the Bills and They've been really great the last 5 weeks, and they're as hot as anyone right now, which is why if they limped in right now, you probably would have seen a different Kevin. But they absolutely found the offensive line, the running game, the quarterback really started to play well, and the defense has been lights out. They're going to be a tough out in Arrowhead on Sunday.
Absolutely. Well, thanks again. Once again, this has been NFL Outdated Cover 2 series on the Buffalo Bills, and big weekend. Thanks again.